Stamp Analyzer is an app that you can get from Raytheum.com, and it accurately grades and measures stamp perforations. The grading refers mainly to the centering, but it's a powerful tool. In this presentation, we're going to look at first at how it works on both Mac and Microsoft. Some examples. So I have them on my Mac, different scans, different formats, the effect of rotating the stamp image, cropping, how we can analyze one stamp and a scan of multiple stamps, and on-cover perforation analyses, grading from centering perspective, how you can correct for postmarks and designs without margins, checking the frame dimensions using a tape measure tool, using the fault grading tool, a little bit about the operator's manual at the end, some menu options, printing results, and storing them. Here is the app that you get from MacBook, $6.99. There's only 5 ratings, rating 3.4 average. Latest software is version 17.1 from 3 years ago. The Microsoft version is 539. It may be $6.99 Canadian, I'm not sure. It's only 3 ratings, and their latest version is from 4 years ago. It's obviously an app that hasn't been put, the developers haven't put a lot of effort into it. They're not selling many copies of it, maybe, I don't know. Here's looking at the startup screen on a Mac. It says just drag and drop the image here. If you have a scan of the stamp open, you can't just take that image. You have to drag and drop the file containing the image, a subtle difference there. And after you analyze one stamp, one can just drop a second file right onto the first, and the analysis will be done. No need to remove the first image or go back to this startup screen. There is a drop-down menu at the top, very little functionality. We'll talk about it at the end. And here's, well, how does it work? Here's the Microsoft startup screen. It's provided by a fellow collector named Phil. I don't have a Microsoft device. It has the same information, same layout. It's a simpler menu just at the bottom, and a lot of, according to Phil, a lot less functionality than the Mac version. So here's the first test. This is Canada's number 16, the 10-cent Prince Albert, and it is only available, it's the first printing of this stamp in a black brown, and it's only in one perforation. It's 11 3/4. This has got a certificate for it. And when I put the analyzer on, it's produced a measure. The top perf says 11.62, the right perf's at 11.81, bottom at 11.81, and the left at 11.81 on a 300 DPI scan. Those numbers are accurate. It assigns it a grade of 45. We'll talk more about the grading later on. I'm going to focus now on this first part of the presentation on the perforations and the tweaks of that. But first of all, another example. This is number 19, 17-cent Jacques Cartier, and a 300 DPI scan. And this 300 DPI scans give mostly correct results. The VG Vincent Graves Green Foundation certificate says that 11 3/4 by 12. We look at it carefully. I did a manual comparison. I didn't look at what these numbers were before I did my own, and I wrote them down on a separate piece of Post-it. I measured it 11.75 across the top, 11.9 on the right, 11.75 on the bottom, quite different, and 11.8 on the left side. So those numbers were reasonable. And I looked more carefully at why there was such a discrepancy between the bottom and on the bottom between what stamp analyzer did and what I come up with. When you look at the bottom of the stamp, it's pretty rough. That's about as coarse of perforations as you could come up with. And when we look at what they did, they put little marks where they believe the perforations are. And you can see this one down here. Well, that's not even really close. If it had been more closer here, or they'd used this one as the last one, they would have had a perforation wider and a lower number in terms of perforations per centimeter per inch. So it's not perfect, but gosh darn, it's close. And I picked a really bad example. The lines in these perfs are color coded. I'm not going to go into the details on that right now, but this is how they do it. On a 1200 DPI scan of the same stamp, totally wrong results. It arbitrarily put in 72 DPI and came up with a bunch of bogus numbers, but the margin lines are accurate. This is the other thing. What they do is they also estimate where the margins are, and that's what they use to calculate assess the grading score. As I said, we'll talk more about that later. Here's a 600 DPI scan of the same stamp, 17 Cartier. And here I highlighted this because there's four numbers here. The 1202 for the top is in black. And black is the color that they use if they have a lot of confidence in that number. Blue, 11.90, is just a moderate level of confidence. The bottom at 12.04, they said this is what they have the lowest confidence in. And the left here at 11.9 is again black, so that's very confident in the results. And I think if we look back at the bottom, we can see why they don't have a lot of confidence. It's been trimmed very close. The 11.9 on the right, perhaps because, well, they didn't like that. They got a good margin. You got good confidence on the left side, though. Here's another 1200 DPI scan. Gives again, this is close. At least they get to set the DPI right, but everything's gone up by about 1 point. But 1200 DPI scans, for me, have not given any correct results. Here's the famous Blue Nose. And this is the 300 DPI .jpeg version. And in the catalog at 12, 12.04, 11.91, 12.01, 11.97. Excellent agreement with what you'd expect. Nice perforation lines. Good fun. They graded at anything at between very good to fine at a 64 score. We'll talk about it again later. When I did this as a PDF version, the particular software that I use enables the stamps to be saved in PDF or JPEG. Well, the PDF, it didn't know what was going on. It just set again the arbitrary DPI at 72 and came up with bogus numbers. On the online manual lists the file types that can be used, and PDF is not one of them. So we shouldn't be too surprised it couldn't take a PDF. Manual says in many images on their web are at 72 DPI. So when it finds something, it doesn't know what it is. It assumes it's from the web and assigns it as 72. I thought that just a multiplication factor, 300 divided by 72 times 2.49 would give you the right result. It doesn't.
That grade, very good to fine, that seems to me like too low a grade for that stamp. I wonder what is their criterion?
The grading is based on, and they're very clear in their manual's instructions, this is based on PSE guidelines. I think it's Phil specialists, experts, or something. I don't know what it stands for, and it's purely mathematical. They do what they do is measure. They measure the top, the clearance, the centering. It's 7.7 on the top and 10.7 at the bottom, 14.4 on the right, and 9.1 on the left. So as this, it's a simple mathematical exercise of those four numbers that calculate the 64. And I don't think it's actually the magnitude of the number as it is the relative differences between them. If they were all if they're all very tight margins, but they're all equal, that gives you a good score. And I think we might have to temper the ruler that we use for assigning very good to fine, depending on the age of the stamp. Or if this were a modern stamp, well, that doesn't look very good. We expect modern stamps to be perfect in their centering. The older the stamps, well, very good can apply quite different to an older stamp. So, but it's purely mathematical. They've published the guidelines they've used for it. And I have 100% confidence that based on the published guidelines for PSE by PSE, this is an accurate number. Here I picked one within the app. You can also select unrounded or rounded numbers. This is good. This has got a 58. The last one had a 64. Well, again, this looks not. This one, we might say this is worse. It's slightly worse. here. So, and it comes through at 11.21 and 11.16 on the top and bottom, pretty close to 11 and a quarter, and 10.6 and 10.58 on the sides. So that may be 11 and a quarter by 10 and a half. I don't know, but that's my estimate based on it.
So
I
the
don't-
catalog is 11.
I don't think the Scott catalog goes into quarters on those stamps.
Here we're looking at how within the app you can select unrounded or rounded results. Interesting. These ones rounded within the app itself, it rounds to the nearest quarter. And you just toggle it by clicking unrounded or rounded. And when you do that, the numbers change. But I have had inordinate number of bizarre and rounding errors. Sometimes 3 of the 4 numbers are rounded, and this was a 10.48 and it didn't get rounded up to 10.5. There's no consistency to the pattern of errors. Sometimes they aren't rounded at all. I'm not sure. There are some quirks and gremlins in that rounding part. The unrounded are always generally, in my opinion, very accurate. Here's an interesting cover. I wanted to do some covers, and it's important to have a defined image of the stamp on a background. So I picked this cover. It was during COVID. My daughter sent a birthday card to me in while I was in Qatar, and it got an inkjet cancel. Thank healthcare workers 2007-22. This would have been July, mid-July of 2020. And what Canada Post did is they put this 2-part label. So they returned it to my daughter because there was the service to Qatar was suspended. There were no flights. When the service was restored, I told her about it. She removed that top label, and underneath it was this resume service label. And so she took that label off, posted it again. Presume that's why it got the pen canceled the second time through. And then I received it in mid-October. But now I was looking at the perforations on this stamp, but that's the background. I wanted a cover that had a stamp on a colored background. Published perf is 12.5, and it came back 12.6, 12.54, 12.53, and 12.53. Perfect agreement. But I noticed that in my scan, the stamp was slightly askew. So after I scanned it, I rotated it by 1 degree using this. I have an HP scanner, and they have an app called Preview, or program. And I used that preview program and saved the image as a new separate file. After scanning, rotating, and gave it a new name. Here it is. It looks beautiful. Nicely centered, but the perforation readings are wrong. What used to be 12.6 is now 12.3. These are all down about 1/4 of a perf. And lesson learned, once you scan your image, do not rotate it. I've had struggles sometimes rotating at 90 degrees too, and 90 degrees sometimes worked and sometimes it didn't. So simply try not to rotate the image at all once you've got it scanned. Let the app analyze and do the correction to square it up.
So Arnie, all the ones I sent you, just so you know, I rotated them.
After
I scanned them after I scanned them, I rotated them so that they were straighter.
Interesting.
But I did it in Photoshop. So I didn't do it with the scanner app.
Okay. Interesting. Here's a coil stamp, and it gives accurate results. We know it's perf 10 published at that. Of course, it thinks the left and right side are imperf. It automatically knows that. And a 300 DPI scan, it's given us some readings, but it looked at the perforations on the bottom of the second stamp and the top of the first stamp. But if you wanted to crop one stamp from a coil pair, here's step 1. Under your tools menu up here in the menu bar, set crop mode to on. This can be confusing because you have to click on it when it is black to turn it on. After setting it on, it becomes gray. And you look at it, is it on or off? No, it's actually the setting it. You have to set it on, click on it while it's black. What it gives you then is a screen with a highlighted section in the middle. And then you drag the corners, these blue corners, with your mouse to highlight and select just the stamp that you want to crop. And when you select crop on that screen, then you click crop up here. And now it crops that stamp. Now it gives you a second highlighted screen, highlighted area. And again, now you have to move the corners until you get to this scan. This is what you highlighted. Where I moved the blue 4 dots in the 4 corners. And instead of clicking, you don't click crop now, you've done it, you have to click analyze. And guess what? Accurate results. Now you're doing just the one stamp. Fine, very fine grading, 74. The same technique can be used to perf a single stamp in a larger block. You can crop one out of it. The grading, of course, may not reflect the centering, but you can at least do some perforation checks. Oh, when rounding turned on, the results are 12.5 by 12, which is the published result. If you had a stock sheet, for example, that had 10 stamps on it and you wanted to do a perforation of one stamp, or 2 stamps, it'd be easy to take your scan. Again, you set the crop mode to on, and then you take that whole image of the multiple stamps, paste it into the startup screen. You'll get your blue dots, you select your stamp, you crop it, just like we did with Quill. And second highlighted screen, again, you stretch out the corners and you analyze. And this comes through at 10.94, 10.86, 10.99, and 10.96. Presume it's a perf 11.
It is.
600. So that's how it works. There is a problem with it, though. I think it's a weakness in the whole design. If you want to analyze another stamp from that original scan, remember those 3 stamps across? You have to go back and repaste that whole set of 3 back in and repeat the whole procedure again. I tried it on bluish paper to see if that would be a factor at all. No issues at all with bluish paper. Very nice, 12.4, 12, 11.9. Here it gives it a little blue. It thinks it's not quite as confident in the bottom perforations. Not sure why, but that's how it spits it out. Here's another one. Oh, we'll see. Okay, so I did this one. I was a little surprised because I think I took Tara's version and cropped it when I took out of the strip, and I think I chopped off the tops of the perfs because I looked back at her copy and it's got full perfs across the top. I must have done this when I cropped it from her page, and surprisingly, it gave us wonderful numbers across the top. Superb, extra fine, superb scale area in 93 here. Just again, it's all pure mathematics. And right over here, it talks about, you click on this US stamps info box. I was expecting to learn information about this stamp. It isn't. It doesn't have any understanding of what that stamp actually is. What it does, if you click on this US stamps info box, you get this menu that pops up, or screen that pops up, that says this talks about the different spacing in thousandths of an inch or 100,000, and the actual perforation and the specialist system. I don't know. This is professional. Yeah, that's the professional specialist, something like that. And the Scott listing, you're right. It looks like it's just done 81.5. I don't know if it's 8.5 or 10, 10.5, 11, 12, 12.5, 15. So those are some of this is what they include on their app if you select that little button. Now, I sure wanted to try more covers. I'd like to. For me, it's important in beavers to understand the different perforations on these. Well, it's mixed results. It gave me the top correct at 10, we know it's perf 12, 11.81, 11.86, 11.95 on the top, bottom, and left side. The right side was a weak link. It thought it was imperf. I checked other covers like this. It happened exactly the same. And I think what happens here is, in my scanner, when it's coming across, the light is causing a bit of a shadow for these 3 sides. And that's what it's looking at. That's what the app is able to pick up. But here, where the light is coming in, there's no shadow on this side, and it didn't work for 3 sides. I guess if I had turned this cover around 180 degrees and scanned it from the other way, I probably would have gotten numbers on it. But and it's unfortunate because many of the older covers, which I'm the ones I'm particularly interested in, are the same color as the pale yellow and light ivory colors. So I'll have to work on something to do better covers. The app needs some clear definition of the perfs. Obviously, black background is best, and requires a contrast in color between the stamp and the cover. But other than that, it can work on cover. Here's another example where the perforations are perfect. Unit rate says perf 12, 12, 11, 8, 9, 9, 6, 11, 8, 7. Fabulous. Now we're going to look in the grading side. It grades this one as very good to fine with just a score of 59. That's better than a 59. Obviously, we all know that. Where's the weakness? Where is the program doing a problem? Because it misinterpreted the cancel down here as part of the design.
No.
And this little margin line, it drew as 0 across the bottom. 15.7 on the top, 15.7 on the right, 17.6 on the left, but 0 on the bottom. Obviously, the app is very powerful. What you use is these grab handles, these orange squares, and you can tweak them and you move them with your mouse up to where you want the margin line to be. And of course, when we do that, we move the margin lines up to where it is. We click reanalyze. That's the important part. And guess what we get now? Fabulous. Extra fine, superb 91 score. And instead of having a 0 margin at the bottom, it's now 17.1. Perfect. So that's if you have a stamp where the cancellation or something is messing up with the margin lines, use the grab handles, move the margin line, you get your new score. Here's another example. The unissued Christmas stamps from 1994 in Canada, where obviously the perforations are correct. It's 13.3 in the catalog. And this is very reasonable. But of course, it's only a very good for 31. Well, because again, there's no clear stamp margin, so centering is difficult to estimate. The best the app can do is to assume the margins are at the edge of the graphics. It didn't even do a very good job of that. It got this one right. Didn't even get this one quite right. This was off, or even not even close. Top and bottom are good. So it came up with 27 at the top and 25 on the bottom, 56 on the right, and 119 on the left, only a 31 score. It's the app's estimate of the margin locations that are the critical problem here. So when I move them with the grab handles, move them around to the top here, the grade now goes to an 85 or 82. So that's what you can do if your stamp doesn't have clear margins. I did this stamp also with a 600 scan. Again, for some bizarre reason, it came up with 72 and didn't like it. I've had struggle with some 600 DPI scans, and others worked perfectly. All I know is that every 300 worked perfectly. I've had mixed success with 600. And it could be that some of the 600s I did rotate 90 degrees. I'm not sure. There is also, I'll go back to the slide. At the very bottom down here is this measuring tape. So that's down here. And you can also use it. And I needed to find a stamp that I had to use a measuring tape for. Well, this is wanted to know on this particular dramatic variety, what was the offset of the nickel? This is the regular stamp. This is the silver printing shifted with a nickel at the top. Oh, I said, well, here's something that I can use as an example to figure out how this measuring tool works. You can also use it to measure, if you needed to measure an overprint, if the width of the bars on the overprint are different or something else about the stamp. So what happens is when you click tape measuring tool, what you get is a pink line, sometimes green, a pink line that is generally in the middle of the design with two ends, and you drag those ends to where you want them to be. This is on two separate screens, obviously. This one's measured at 1.37 centimeters from here to here. I wanted to measure it relative to a fixed reference. The edge of the margin was, the margin line is fixed. I figured 1.35. That means my offset is 1.02 centimeters or 10 millimeters. But that's how you can use the tape measure or the measuring tape tool. But interestingly, this is a fascinating thing. When I did it, the variety, the tops and the bottoms were fine, but I had suddenly now a quarter of a perforation difference between the variety and the regular. This one rounded out at 13.25 each, and this the actual published is 13 by 13.5. So how is it that the perforations are how can the printing press come up with a perforation difference? A quarter of a perforation difference, you should be able to see it, and sure enough, you can. They're lined up nicely at the bottom, but by the time they get to the top, they're no longer aligned. Clearly, a perforation difference between the regular stamp and the variety. The explanation is part of an upcoming presentation. When you look at the top and bottom, they line up perfectly. Well, almost perfectly. You look at that closely lined up, there is a slight, you could argue, but this is manually, these two are perfectly lined up. There is actually a very slight difference. You could argue that may be the difference between 10.07 and 10.1. It's all 13.1, probably a round number. And I think that's what really, if Unitrade had been publishing the correct perforation, this would have been a 13.1, not 13.0. Let's look at grading here again. This is Perf 12 catalog. Very nice scores. The grading assigned is a 61. Well, if you want to adjust the grading for stamp faults, and you tick this fault settings box. For faults, if you assume there's a minor fault, except a minor thin, your PSE guidelines list 6 different categories of faults, and there are 7, including faultless. Extremely minor, very minor, minor fault, major fault, severe fault. And for each of these, it assigns an arbitrary score. And that's built into this program. And for a minor fault, I don't know what constitutes minor. I assume minor thin. That's minus 26. So that would then drop the grading from 61 down to 35. Now there's also this I appeal category. There's the faults and the I appeal, which is, again, subjective. It gives it a 35 good score. If you include the I appeal setting, well, it's got a very light cancel, and I can tweak the grading upwards by plus 10. So your final grading is 45. And now it's a very good 45 score. Here's a little bit more of a tweak using the Queen Victoria, number 14, a very popular halfpenny, first issue in the cents issue. And at the bottom down here, we see the frame dimensions. I made a mistake here in my numbers. Bottom line is what you want to do is to check that the top and the bottom numbers are the same. That means that when you moved your tweak, your grab handles, you actually kept the frame size square. On the homepage of Rakium.com, that's where they put the operating manual. There's nothing in the actual app that gives you the operating instructions. They also have a little bit of hints and galleries and testimonials, various other things. We believe is run by Canadians. Not only do many examples feature the Canadian stamp, the email address is rakium@videotron.ca. We know Videotron is in Eastern Canada. Enlarging a stamp image. If you double click on the image, once you've pasted it in, and once you double click on it, it gives you a larger image. And that, when I was doing the moving using grab handles and getting the lines to measure the measuring tape accurately, I had to enlarge the image to get the tape exactly where I wanted. And so that's what you can use if you need to enlarge the image. Double clicking on it does not bring you back. You have to click on cancel. That gets you back to this screen here. On the MacBook startup screen, some of these menu items across the top under File, we'll look at it in a second. The only option is to print. Under View here, we can swap views. We'll see what that looks like. And you can also go back to the startup screen. Frequently, if I've had a glitch, there are gremlins in it. Sometimes it crashes and you just go back to the startup screen and you're back in business again. Under tools over here, that's the set crop mode. We talked about that earlier in the presentation. Here's the swap views. If you'd like to look at it on a white background, that's exactly the same information as the black information. And this happens to also be, if you print it out, that's what it's going to look like. So the MacBook Print up at the top under File, Print gives you this. For the Microsoft, you have to select the print icon down here, bound here, that little icon there. And that's what it looks like, what you'd print out on the Microsoft. Now, if you read the reviews that are online, the comments, one of the comments is very negative because it says, I cannot get an electronic output of this, of my results. Well, it is possible to do the electronic output. It's really, really simple. It's the same for both MS and MacBook versions. You just do a print screen on, or called screen capture, or I used to call it a snipping tool on a Microsoft software operating system, and then you save that.
In your print box, there's usually an option save to PDF.
You can go to, when you go to File, if you hit Export, and then your option there is to PDF.
Microsoft, obviously it works at 600 according to my colleague Phil. Sure, it's also generally very accurate. I pointed out a couple of instances where it wasn't. Don't rotate images after scanning. Now, obviously, whatever Tara did worked, because I've had mixed results with rotated images. Easy to crop the image from block or scan of multiple images, but going back is not possible. It's a programming weakness. Rounding errors can occur. I haven't figured out what triggers them. Grading can be influenced by cancels, can be corrected by using the grab handles to reposition the margin lines. Some programming gremlins generally can be corrected by starting over again. Overall, if you want to measure perfs accurately for $5.99 or $6.99, it's a fabulous tool.